Modern civilization is slowly replacing reality with simulation. Life is no longer something we inhabit, it's something we watch. Modern society has built an environment where appearances replace substance, spectacle replaces experience. And the cruel paradox is this: the more successful you are within the system, the less real your life is. If you've ever felt that instead of living, you're watching yourself live, if you've ever felt like an NPC in your own life, then listen up. Because what's at stake is bigger than we can possibly imagine. We're living through a silent theft of human vitality, not just personally, civilizationally. And there's no greater danger than a life that doesn't feel real. Around 2010, I had what can only be described as an out of body experience. I saw myself teach from up high in the corner of the classroom. It was a perfectly normal day, and yet something in me changed forever. At that moment, I realized I wasn't living my own life. I was there, but not there. I quickly discovered that it wasn't just my problem. The collective as a whole is living inside a simulation. Of course, we can call it the matrix. Nietzsche called it the loss of immediacy, the moment when life becomes something we interpret instead of something we live. Schopenhauer described it as living behind the veil of Maya, mistaking representation for reality. The idea is not new, but what is new is how deeply this condition now shapes our everyday lives. Most people misdiagnose this as personal failure without realizing that it's modern life making them sick. This is not random, it was carefully, astutely designed. We now live inside environments that were intentionally built to foster distance from direct experience. We spend most of our lives indoors, under artificial light, looking at screens instead of horizons. We move less, we touch less, speak less face to face. We experience sunsets through photographs or AI, conversations through text, achievement through metrics. Even our emotions are increasingly mediated, filtered, analyzed, healed, optimized. Modern civilization has not only reorganized how we live, it has reorganized how reality reaches us. It's no coincidence that many people romanticize the 90s because back then life felt slower, more physical, less observed. You had to knock on someone's door to see if they were home. You got lost in cities without GPS correcting your path. Music lived in physical places, record stores, bedrooms, cars, not inside infinite digital libraries. Friendships formed in shared environments, not curated feeds. Moments disappeared if you didn't live them. Nothing was archived, nothing was optimized, nothing was constantly compared. Experience had texture, friction, weight. While today, instead, friction is treated as failure, slowness as inefficiency, silence as a problem to fix. The modern epidemic is disconnection, disconnection from one another, but even more dangerously, disconnection from ourselves. Disconnected population are easier to influence, easier to pacify, easier to monetize. Disconnected people are easier to control. They begin to doubt their own agency. They assume systems are immovable, that nothing they do truly matters. A quiet nihilism sets in, not dramatic despair, but a low grade defeatism. Life becomes something to endure rather than something to shape. When people lose contact with what makes them feel alive, they compensate. They consume more, scroll more, optimize more, perform more. They build identities instead of discovering character. They attach to ideologies instead of developing critical thinking. They mistake simulation for meaning. When you're disconnected from others, you lose social mirroring, attunement correction. You no longer experience yourself through the intelligence of real human presence. There are fewer checks and balances, less accountability. Reality becomes easier to distort. A society that no longer meets itself in real time becomes extremely vulnerable to manufactured realities. When experience is mediated, perception becomes steerable. And when perception is steerable, power no longer needs to coerce, it only needs to curate. When you're disconnected from yourself, the consequences are even deeper. You lose the ability to recognize what you truly want, what feels right, what feels wrong. Your internal compass weakens. Desire becomes programmable. Morality becomes negotiable. Identity becomes performative. You begin to live according to scripts that were never consciously chosen. You become efficient, readable, predictable, a functioning unit inside a well oiled machine. Productive on the surface, but strangely absent from your own life. Efficient enough to keep going, but not alive enough to question. This is not accidental drift, it is the logical outcome of a civilization that prioritizes control over contact, measurability over mystery, optimization over participation. Simulation is efficient, aliveness is not, and systems built on efficiency will always tend towards simulation. Decades ago, a visionary French thinker named Debord called modern civilization the society of the spectacle. A world where lived experience is gradually replaced by representations of experience. Reality is turned into spectacle. The spectacle of identity, the spectacle of a life that appears meaningful from the outside while feeling strangely hollow from within. We're surrounded by events that are constantly amplified, sensationalized, made to feel urgent. And yet, beneath the noise, many people feel increasingly disconnected from their own time, their own direction, their own sense of authorship. We're invited to watch life unfold more than to inhabit it, to react more than to originate, to manage appearances more than to encounter reality. Spectacle seems intense, but it rarely produces true sensation. We're overstimulated yet underfelt, surrounded by signals, yet losing contact with the raw current of being alive. We live in a world made to feel sensational and have become more and more sensationless. We have forgotten how to truly feel. We're sold spectacle while experiencing emptiness and disconnection. Everything is made to feel urgent. We're not owners of our time, not authors of our life. We lost contact with our own aliveness. We've lost our own sense of authorship. Over time, this distance does not only affect how we experience the world, it affects how we experience ourselves. Many people today don't feel fully located inside their own life. They're outside of it, but they are not realizing it. They're monitoring, adjusting, interpreting, constantly watching themselves live. Simulation is not only technological, it doesn't just exist out there, it is also psychological. It's a mode of existence where direct contact is gradually replaced by representation. And this can happen, of course, inside of us too. Not only curating our identities to others, but also losing touch with who we truly are. And the psyche adapts. When direct aliveness becomes rare, we compensate with intensity, more stimulation, more achievement, more addiction, more visibility. We try to feel real by amplifying experience by getting the dopamine spikes. And yet, the underlying sensation of not being fully here quietly deepens. Many people today are not overwhelmed by life, they're under contacted by it. It's not that life is too much, it's that we are no longer fully inside it. I noticed this once walking through New York. People everywhere, movement, noise, light, and yet I felt strangely untouched by it all. As if life was happening on a screen I was moving through. I could function, interact, decide, but the immediacy was missing. That was when I began to wonder whether this distance was personal or something larger too. You begin to anticipate your reactions instead of being surprised by them. You begin to curate your identity instead of discovering your true character, to evaluate experiences instead of being altered by them. The self becomes mediated, filtered through expectation, performance, and quiet self surveillance. At some point, you're no longer simply living, you're managing the impression of being a person who is living. The distance is no longer between you and the world, it's between you and yourself. The danger is not technological domination, the danger is perceptual drift. Entire lives can be lived inside competent simulation. Roles performed, goals completed, memories accumulated, without ever returning to the raw immediacy of being alive. We risk becoming highly functional interpreters of existence rather than participants in it. The risk is not that reality disappears, the risk is that we slowly lose the capacity to inhabit it, to be fully pierced by experience, to be changed by what happens to us, to feel time as something living rather than something to be managed. Entire lives can unfold in this subtle simulation, yet beneath the surface, a quiet question persists. Was I ever fully there? Modern life does not only produce burnout, it produces spectral existence, a state where we function but rarely arrive. A civilization that loses contact with immediacy does not collapse overnight. It continues efficiently, impressively, but increasingly without a soul. Something begins to change the moment we recognize how much of what we call normal life is actually lived at a distance. When we start seeing everyday stimuli as engineered spectacle, perception itself shifts. We begin to notice how rarely we are fully inside the moment. The return to reality does not begin with dramatic change. It begins with noticing distance, not judging it, not dramatizing it, simply recognizing how often we're living in anticipation or memory. What was missing was never productivity, was not stimulation, was not opportunity, it was aliveness, the felt sense of being directly in touch with what is happening. Reality is not something we need to construct. It is something we need to risk entering. Even ordinary life begins to change when experienced from this place. The day regains texture. Conversations regain unpredictability. Time regains depth. The spectacle loses power the moment we become available to experience. Re entry into life is not always comfortable. Direct experience is unpredictable. It cannot be fully curated or rehearsed in advance. It asks something of you: attention, vulnerability, presence. Aliveness does not arrive as a concept, it arrives as contact. The moment you stop narrating and begin encountering. The moment something affects you before you have time to interpret it. Ordinary life can suddenly feel more intense when lived without mediation. Conversations become less controllable. Time becomes less predictable. Experience becomes harder to manage and more real. Aliveness is not soothing, but its presence is unmistakable. If reality has felt distant, it may not be because you failed at life. It may be because you adapted to environments that reward distance, environments that train perception towards performance rather than participation. Over time, this adaptation can feel normal. Simulation can feel like stability. Mediation can feel like safety. Until a moment comes when the absence of direct contact becomes impossible to ignore. Nothing was wrong with your capacity to feel alive, but reconnecting with that capacity may require tolerating uncertainty again. Slowness, friction, exposure to what definitely cannot be optimized. Awakening to this is not always comfortable, but it restores something essential, the possibility of actually inhabiting your own life. If what I'm saying resonates, stay with this inquiry, subscribe. This channel is a growing body of work about restoring aliveness in a world that quietly trains you to live at a distance from your own life. And if you want to go deeper, I share longer reflections, frameworks, and updates in the newsletter below. We were never meant to be spectators of our own existence, and once you begin to see that clearly, it becomes very difficult to return to living only on the surface.